Franklin. The death angel gathers its last harvest. Would to God I could tear the page from these memoirs and from my own memory. It is the blackest page in the history of the War of the Lost Cause. It was the bloodiest battle of modern times in any war. It was the finishing stroke to the independence of the Southern Confederacy. I was there. I saw it. My flesh trembles and creeps and crawls when I think of it today. My heart almost ceases to beat at the horrid recollection. Would to God that I had never witnessed such a scene. The death angel was there to gather its last harvest. It was the grand coronation of death. I can only tell of what I saw.
As the Army of Tennessee moved across the state line into Tennessee, citizens had placed a banner out by the road, a crude sign that said, Tennessee, a grave or a free home.
Forrest knew that there was a gap which would allow the Army to bypass the Franklin Road to Nashville. He urged Hood to very seriously take that route.
Hood abruptly, quickly said, we will make the fight, and we will make it with honor. You will go in at right shoulder shift, bayonets fixed. You will not fire a shot until you overrun the advance line, then shoot and stab the enemy in the back and go into the works with them and drive the enemy into the river to all hazards.
Filled with this terrible resolve, Hood ordered the battle lines formed, with Patrick Cleburne's men positioned to go up the middle.
What's most important is that there was a breakfast at Ripa Villa, the Nat Cheers home, the morning of the 30th, with the generals. And there Hood blamed everybody but himself.
More than anyone, Hood blamed Frank Cheatham and Patrick Cleburne. He decided they were responsible and that their men should be punished.
And after the meeting, as they were leaving, Forrest and Hood were the last to leave. And as they were walking out the door, General Forrest turned out back to Hood and said, General Hood, if you were a whole man, I'd whip you the inch of your life. God damn it.
But Hood was determined. He wanted the entire army to march to Franklin in force and attack the enemy head-on. Cheatham's men were to lead that charge.
There's no doubt that Hood was punishing this army, especially Cheatham's corps. There was no mistake. Who's making the frontal assault, moving right up the gut at 4 p.m. was Brown's and Cleburne's division. Govan noticed a very despondent look on Cleburne's face. And he said, well, General, it doesn't look like many of us are going to make it back to Arkansas to tell the tale of this fight. And Cleburne's reply was, well, Govan, if we're to die, then let us die like men.
There were groans and cries from the Confederate soldiers that a lot of the Federals had never heard before. One of the Federal soldiers knew they were in a desperate, desperate spot when he heard some of the Confederates praying outside of their works.
On November 30th, A.J. Smith's 16th Corps finally arrived in. Smith's boys had traveled over 1,000 miles in the past month, and they were a rough-looking set. They boasted they'd been to Vicksburg, Red River, and Missouri. If old A.J. orders us to, we'll go to hell itself. At 4 p.m. on November 30th, 1864, 20,000 Confederate soldiers, 6 divisions of the Army of Tennessee, begin their mile-and-a-half march toward the Federal works.
The afternoon sun, like a ball of fire, setting in all its southern splendor in a molten sea of bronze over the distant hills. In the hazy golden light, and with their yellowish-brown uniforms, those in front seemed to be magnified in size. One could almost imagine them to be phantoms sweeping along in the air.
A profound silence pervaded the entire army. It was simply awful, reminding one of those sickening lulls which precede a tremendous thunderstorm.
Adam Weaver, the 104th Ohio, said, 4 o'clock, the air's hazy. I can honestly hear bands playing and that eerie, defiant rebel yell. May God be with us.
The Missourians advanced bent over, with their hats pulled down over their eyes, as though for protection from a hailstorm. Old hell was let loose and coming.
This was the only battle where the tooters and shooters went in together.
Friends and foes soon learned to watch the course of the blue flag that marked where Claiborne was in the battle. Where this division defended, no odds broke its lines. Where it attacked, no numbers resisted its onslaught, save only once. There is the grave of Claiborne and his heroic division. General William Hardee.
Among them was the talismanic figure of Patrick Claiborne, wearing a new uniform jacket, white linen shirt and kepi. He was mounted on a borrowed horse, as his regular animal, Red Pepper, had been wounded the previous day at Spring Hill. Riding forward into action, it seemed that, as promised, he was determined to lead by example and personally take his men over the federal works. A grievous error committed by Union General George D. Wagner handed them an opportunity. Wagner had left 2 of his brigades exposed a half a mile beyond the main federal line. They were far too small a force to stem the Confederate assault, and when the Army of Tennessee hit them, their position crumbled. As Wagner's men turned and ran for Franklin, Claiborne's soldiers sought to chase after them and follow them into the main line of works. Captain Sam Foster of Claiborne's division described how the Union men would, and I quote, fire a few shots and break to a run, and as soon as they break to run, our men break after them. They have nearly half a mile to run to get back to their next line, so here we go, right after them, and yelling like fury and shooting at them at the same time. Kill some of them before they reach their works, and those that are in the second line of works are not able to shoot us because of their own men are in front of us and between us and them. Although Claiborne and his men were initially shielded by Wagner's fleeing troops, eventually the federal main line simply had to open fire. For those caught in it, be they Union or Confederate, the result was the same.
The long line of blue coats rose, and a flash of flame shot out in a sinuous line, and the white smoke rose like the foam on the crest of a breaker. The few straggling blue coats and the long line of gray went down like overripe grain before a blast of wind and hail. Bill Kesey, 64th Ohio.
By this time, Patrick Claiborne had crossed Wagner's advanced position and was heading for the main line when he was suddenly catapulted from his horse, which was killed under him. With the fire intensifying, one of Claiborne's couriers leapt from his own mount and offered it to the general. Just as Claiborne put his foot in the stirrup, a cannonball fired from near the cotton gin ploughed into the animal, eviscerating it. Claiborne, though, decided to press on. General Govan last caught sight of him plunging forward on foot, waving his cap in encouragement to the men before he disappeared into the smoke of battle. It was the last time he ever saw him.
They were coming on a run, emitting the shrill rebel charging yell, and so close that my first impulse was to drop flat on the ground and let them charge over. Captain John Schellenberger, Wagner's division.
I distinctly heard the unmistakable whack and knew that some of our boys was hit. They came with a rush and a yell and swept like a cyclone across that field. It was now safer in the rear, and the order came not a whit too soon. Fall back. William Beachey.
4 o'clock on that dark and dismal December day when the line of battle was formed, and those devoted heroes were ordered forward to strike for their altars and their fires, for the green graves of their sires, for God and their native land. Forward, men, is repeated all along the line. A sheet of fire was poured into our very faces, and for a moment we halted as if in despair, as the terrible avalanche of shot and shell laid low those brave and gallant heroes whose bleeding wounds attested that the struggle would be desperate. The death angel shrieks and laughs, and old Father Time is busy with his sickle as he gathers in the last harvest of death, crying, "More, more, more." With the skirmish line being deployed out, extending a little wider than the battle did, we advanced on toward the breastworks, on and on. I had made up my mind to die. Felt glorious. We pressed forward until I heard the terrific roar of battle open on our right. Cleburne's division was charging their works. Our troops were upon one side of the breastworks and the Federals on the other. I ran up on the line of works where our men were engaged. Dead soldiers filled the entrenchments. The firing was kept up until after midnight.
H.B. Granberry from Texas. His last words, appropriately enough, were "Forward, men, forward. Never let it be said Texans lag in a fight."
With these words, Granbury was felled by a single shot to the head.
Well, as Sam Watkins said, when the morrow's sun began to lighten up the eastern skies with its rosy hues, we looked over the battlefield and, oh my God, what did we see? It was the grand holocaust of death. Death held high carnival there that night.
General Hood has betrayed us. This is not the kind of fighting he promised us. This was not a fight with equal numbers and choice of the ground. The wails and cries of widows and orphans made at Franklin, Tennessee, November 30th, 1864, will heat up the fires of the bottomless pit to burn the soul of General John Bell Hood for murdering their husbands and fathers. It can't be called anything else but cold-blooded murder. Captain Sam Foster, one of Cleburne's command.
Blow ye breezes softly o'er him, fan his brow with gentle breath. Disturb ye not the peaceful slumber, Cleburne sleeps the sleep of death. Rest thee, Cleburne, tears of sadness flow from hearts thou'st nobly won. Memory ne'er will cease to cherish deeds of glory thou hast done.